Welcome back for more physiology. Today we're going to be dealing with lung disorders, in particular, what can go wrong. So there's lots of lung disorders that exist. We can't go through all of them, but I wanted to highlight a few. So one of them would be pneumonia. So pneumonia is you have a lung infection, and what you end up getting is swelling of the alveoli, and the result of that is we're not going to have efficient gas exchange. So depending on the type of pneumonia you have, if you have viral pneumonia, we give you antivirals for that. You'll be fine. If it's bacterial pneumonia, this isn't going to be as fun for you because the bacterial version is lethal. You'll get antibiotics. There's also a rare form of pneumonia, which is a fungal pneumonia. And that's typically showing up because you happen to have a immune dysfunction, immune disorders. So if you have fungal pneumonia, you have a few other things happening to you. Another condition that happens is something called pleurisy or pleuritis, and that is when the pleura, which is the bag that surrounds your lungs, gets inflamed. It's the serous membrane around your lungs. And if it gets inflamed, the result is it's going to swell up with water and it's going to start to compress on the lungs. Sometimes you hear people saying like, oh, I have water on the lungs or something like that. That's this condition. It depends on the cause, viral or bacterial. That'll determine how horrible this is going to be for you and how much medical professionals are going to be freaking out. An inherited disorder turns out to be what we call cystic fibrosis. What happens in cystic fibrosis is you have a transport protein, so a protein found inside of the membrane that moves ions. And what happens is you have an issue moving ions into mucus, which line your trachea and your bronchi and your alveoli and your intestinal tract. And by not being able to pump ions in, we have an issue of then moving water into the mucus to make it liquidy. And the result is the mucus hardens up. And it's a very good location for some type of bacterial infection. So people with cystic fibrosis, once upon a time ago, would die from lung infections. And the mothers would sit there and pound on the backs of the babies trying to beat the mucus out. That doesn't happen anymore because now we have some genetic engineering, some gene alteration treatments that have shown some improvement in cystic fibrosis. We're also finding out better ways to deal with the antibiotics and taking out the infections. So people with cystic fibrosis now can live a long time, but it's something that you inherit. Lung cancer is clearly a big deal. There's not one type of lung cancer. So from this pie chart, which is I don't know how many years old, what we notice are lung cancer is not lung cancer. There's several versions of it. And there's a portion of the population that will get lung cancer who don't smoke, which means the odds of getting lung cancer still exist for everyone because cancer has a risk factor for everyone. Obviously, if you're a smoker, much greater odds, but still. If we looked at some facts, it's about 5 to 15 out of 100,000 people who don't smoke will get it. And then it's 5 times for those who do smoke. Okay, well, still, those are pretty good odds. Catch is a huge majority of them will turn out to get cardiovascular disease. And cardiovascular disease turns out to be the number one killer of Americans. So the whole let's shame people into not smoking because they're going to get lung cancer, statistics are kind of against you on that one. What would be a smarter move is to encourage them not to have cardiovascular issues. And that one's a big deal because cardiovascular issues are lethal to Americans. So, just saying. There's also a whole bunch of disorders referred to as COPD, or chronic obstructive pulmonary disorders, as I had an issue breathing. So what happens here is we're having issues with gas exchange. So one of those could be bronchitis, which is when your bronchi are going to start to contract on you. And when that happens, the result is it's harder to have airflow through because of Poissier's law. Voila, we're going to have issues breathing. Emphysema turns out to be when the alveoli start to fuse together, which means we're losing surface area. And if we lose surface area, we're going to lose functionality, namely where gas exchange occurs. There's another one that a lot of people have heard of, which would be asthma, and that would be when your bronchioles contract. So it's kind of like bronchitis, we're just changing the location. The result is we have a narrowing due to the inflammation. We narrow the pathway, we have more resistance, which means it's going to be harder to breathe. The last one I have for you is tuberculosis, which is caused by a bacteria, Mycobacterium tuberculosis. And it turns out Mycobacterium is really hard to grow. I actually had to grow it in microbiology when I had the class in college. And it's just really hard to grow this stuff, which means it's not going to be growing pretty quickly, and your body has a chance to realize, hey, wait a second, there's something here. So what ends up happening is your body is going to start to wall it off and attack. And the result of the attack is we get these holes built into your lungs, and it's going to start to fall apart, and you're going to start coughing out your lungs, hence its old name is consumption. And the result is you're going to lose parts of your lungs due to this infection. Your body's freaking out because you have bacteria in there, and yeah, they're not particularly helpful, but they're also not really going out of their way to harm you. This is actually more of your body is causing its own demise. There are lots of lung disorders. Tuberculosis is among them that we still need to worry about, but so do all these other ones outside of cystic fibrosis, because you're not going to catch that anytime soon. But lung disorders are universally pretty horrible, and there's a lot more than just what I listed here. Feel free to look up some on your own.